Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255. BBC Radio Manchester.
Hiya. You all right? Good. Did you eat your kids? No, I think I might have mispronounced that. I think I said, did you eat your kids? Did you hit? Well, did you eat your kids? Let's get that out of the way first. If anyone ate the kids, do please ring in, but don't burp. Did you beat your kids? Did you slap them? It's that story in the news. It's all over the papers today. A bloke, Jim McCullough, slaps his kid, 13-year-old, who was up to no good. There's no question there. The suggestion by everybody is that she was up to no good. She wasn't behaving. He gave her a slap. He said he was in perfect control. He wasn't beating her up. He wasn't working out on her. He wasn't doing anything horrible. He just gave her a slap to catch her short, as they say. And he ended up getting taken into custody and eventually was charged. And the phrase, although I've not seen it in any of the papers, the phrase used, and it is the right phrase, the phrase uses, and accepted a police caution. The police are the nation's biggest blackmailers. They blackmail more people than any other group. They blackmail all the time. Because what they do is they say, well, do you want to accept a caution? Because if you do, we won't take you to court and you won't have all that bad publicity. You know, it's blackmail. It's a disgusting way of running a crime and punishment scheme, but there you are. But I think Mr. McCullough should have refused a caution. He should have said, no, I'm not accepting a caution. Because what a caution is, people forget this, what a caution is a plea of guilty. He may think, well, caution's the least thing possible. No, it's a criminal record. You could have pleaded not guilty. You could have said, no, I do not accept a caution. I have done nothing wrong. You can stick your caution where the sun doesn't shine. It would have been quite funny to add, and if you don't like that, I'll give you a slap, but it probably won't, not wise, but funny. So he shouldn't have accepted the caution. He should have said, take me to court. Let's see what the magistrates think. Let's see if you can convince the magistrate that me striking my unruly child once is in some way a criminal offence. Because my understanding of the law, and who the hell am I? I'm not a lawyer, but then neither are the coppers. I'm not a lawyer. They're not lawyers. They're blackmailers. I'm not, as far as I'm aware. So they should have said, well, if you're not accepting a caution, we'll send it to the public prosecutor. I don't think it'd have got much further than that. I think the public prosecutor would have said, what's the evidence? What's gone wrong here? He slapped her once. Is that the evidence? Is that what we're going to ask the magistrates? He slapped her once. Can you lock him up, please? It's not going to happen. So I'm afraid he should have said, no, I don't accept a caution. Remember, that is the phrase. I accept the caution. I plead guilty. And he's stuffed now because he's pled guilty. That's it. That's his plea. He's pled guilty. It's over. He should have said, no, I've done nothing wrong. No, all right, he's bleating in the papers and all of that, and I don't blame him because the blackmail he was presented with by Greater Manchester Police stinks. It stinks to high heaven. But it was up to him not to respond to it. Kevin, via email. That bloke who slapped his 13-year-old daughter's face should thank his lucky stars he didn't slap her bum. He'd still be in jail now, which is maybe true.
Your Sunday Morning Lion with Mike Shaft.
You mentioned that you lead worship. What does that entail?
It's literally just providing a clear guide through an act of worship. What we're starting to see is people who maybe aren't so gifted in preaching, but are able to get a flow through the worship times with the sung worship.
Mike Shaft.
Tell us about Workshop.
Workshop began with the idea of creating an environment where Christians could think through and engage with the really big questions of their faith and create a holistic understanding of faith.
Manchester's faith, spirit, and life's difficult questions with Mike Shaft.
This wasn't planned, but it's going to happen.
Sunday morning from 7 on BBC Radio Manchester.
Have you ever lived down south? I don't mean we are posted there in the forces. That doesn't quite count, does it? Because you're already a weird one, aren't you? If you're posted there, you're the odd one out. Well, you're the odd 10,000 out, or however many. I was posted down south by the army, but I actually lived in a private house. I lived in barracks for a while, but I eventually moved into a private house in a place called Harestock in Winchester. I quite liked Winchester. It was all right as a town, a city, call it what you will. It was a nice place to live. And well, it's hard to compare, because this was probably 1967 or something like that. But there was no street violence. It was a gentle town. Might have even been a city. But it was a very lackadaisical place. You just got on with your life quietly. We were soldiers, obviously, so we did what we had to do, but it was a fairly straight, which involved getting drunk and falling over a bit, but it was a fairly sedentary place. You wouldn't mind living there. I lived in as I say, I lived in a private house, a semi-detached house. It was provided by the forces. No other reason I was living there, and I can't tell you the precise reason I was living there, but never mind. I was living in a semi-detached house, and I lived there on and off, because I wasn't there permanently. I lived there on and off over a period of probably about 6 months. And I never got to know the name of my neighbour. I met him a number of times, and his wife and his children, in the street. You know, you're coming out of your front gate, they're coming out of theirs. You say, hi, how you doing? Nothing. Nothing. No response. Now, that might have been because they knew I was a squaddy, although I doubt it. It might have been because they were just very, very shy. But I got the sensation, frankly, they were just snobs. That's how it felt to me, living down south. The reason I mention it is because there's this report today. The Tories, by the way, have said that it's not their policy. But there's a suggestion that those who can't find work, for example, should move down to the southeast, where the world is a wonderful place, by all accounts. It's also been suggested that the redevelopment of northern towns and cities hasn't worked. It's not done the trick. All right, they're redeveloped, they may be prettier, there's fewer slums, but frankly, it's still no place to get a job, so why don't you just move down south? That's the way forward. The fact that we're already a southern-centric, is that a fair word? A southern-centric nation appears to have no bearing on the matter as far as the newspapers are concerned and the reports are concerned. But what do you say? Have you ever lived in a southern town? What was it like? What was it like as a northerner, living in a southern town, living in, like I say, I lived in Winchester for a while. I frequently refer to Billericay. I did meet one couple some years ago when I was making another programme, a radio programme. I met a couple who were from Newcastle upon Tyne. They were born and bred in Newcastle upon Tyne. They lived all their lives until one of them went to university and the other went to college in Newcastle upon Tyne. And when he finished university as an accountant, they got married and they then moved to, I think it was Edinburgh. But after that, they moved down south. They moved to Basingstoke, as it happens, and they fitted in fantastic. They were part of the local community. They loved living there. And when they had the opportunity, because they won the lottery, that's why I was talking to her, when they had the opportunity to move wherever they wanted, they could go and live anywhere in the country with £2.5 million in the bank. Well, 1.7 million I think they had, but they could have lived anywhere in the country. They said, no, we're going to stay in Basingstoke. We like living here. It's a nice town. They're nice people. We've got good neighbours, good schools, all the rest of it. So they stayed there by choice. They enjoyed it. They liked being there. I know lots of other people, particularly people who move down to London for work. They frequently say, after they've been there 6 months and seen all the sights, they frequently say, well, frankly, I'd rather move back home. I'd rather come up north. But how was it for you, is the question. Stop it. How was it for you when you lived down south? Where did you live? Why were you there? And what was it like? More to the point, how did you get on with your neighbours? How did you get on with your workmates? And what was it like compared... Now, it's difficult because it's not home. If you're from up here, if you're from Bury or whatever and you move to Billericay, if you're from Rochdale and you move to Romsey, I'm going to stop doing this, it's going to get hard. If you're from Oldham and you move to... I told you. If you're from Bolton and you move to Bournemouth, you're the incomer. It's not home. You're not living at home. So there are all the problems of that. and they can be added to if you have difficulty fitting into the community, the culture, if you like. But have you lived down south? If so, what was it like? It's 12:15. Joan in Charlton. Hiya,
Hello.
Joan. Hiya.
Hello. Yes, we lived, when I was young, down at Harrow, Rayners
Well,
Lane.
that's very posh, isn't it?
Well, it was a very new estate. It was Rayners Lane. I was only a little girl. It was about the 1930s or so. And we lived there about 4 years. And just before we moved, we were from Liverpool, so we're obviously Northerners. Just before we moved, the next-door neighbour began to say good morning.
4 years, they began to say good morning.
Good morning, yeah.
Crying out loud. I obviously, with me 6 months, was nowhere near close.
So we got to know others, and me being a child, of course, got friendly with. But that was the next door neighbour. It took 4 years to condescend to say good morning.
But how was it? I mean, you were a child. How was it? Did you get friendly with the local kids?
Oh yes,
Because
yes.
kids are different, aren't they? Kids.
Yeah, but actually it was a bit out. I went to. Oh, what was I be? I'd be about 7, that was it. And I could already do longhand and long division, having coming from Liverpool. So I was put in a class of 9-year-olds, so that wasn't very easy.
No.
And then they built a new school in South Harrow, and that was much more pleasant. Well, Pinner it was really. And that was much more pleasant. I began to be top of the class in the class of my own
Oh
age.
dear, that doesn't help, does it?
Oh, I don't know. That was a very happy school. I have happy memories of
Yeah.
that, but the first one wasn't too good.
Fabulous. And did your parents ever? I mean, obviously, when you got older, but did they ever say what it felt like to be living next door to people for all those years and not even speaking to them?
I don't think they were greatly worried, really.
No?
Say, with being a child, you make friends with
Yes,
the
of course you
children,
do,
and then
yeah,
the mums get to know each other. So Mum had 1 or 2 friends, but it was just the next door neighbours. So
How
they
very-
had sons. I think they were in the Guards. So they
Oh dear, oh
probably
well,
considered
yes.
themselves
Yeah, they
posh.
lived in Harrow, their children were guardsmen.
Yeah.
Oh yes, they're above the likes of, we don't want these Liverpool
Liverpool.
people. Yes, we don't want it, do we? But one of the things they've said, one of the things this think tank has been saying, that the redevelopment, I know you're in Charlton now, but I bet you keep your eye on Liverpool. The redevelopment in Liverpool has been a failure, is what it's saying.
Oh, I don't really know. That's where the family was. But we've lived down in Harrow and Oxford and Manchester for more years. You know, my secondary school onwards, we were in Manchester. So I have a cousin still there, so I don't really know Liverpool very well now.
I quite like the place, but there you are. Good on you,
I
John.
like
Thank
the
you.
people in
Well, yeah,
Liverpool.
not all of them. Not by any means all of them,
No,
but that's
no,
the
but-
same round here.
They're so funny, aren't they? Such a
Quite.
sense of humour.
They can be, without
Yeah.
a doubt. Good on you. There was somebody telling a tale, I don't know where it was the other day, there was somebody telling a tale about a heckler at a comedy concert, and the comedian was doing his or her best to entertain them, and somebody shouted from that, "Get off!" And he said, "Well, that's not giving me much to work in as a heckler, has it? Give me something current to work with." And the bloke shouted, "Get off now!" Good on you, Joe. I heard that yesterday, I don't know where, but good on you. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Joan lived in Harrow, and it took 4 years for the next door neighbour to say hello. Extraordinary. 0161 228 2255. Have you lived down south? If you have, what was it like as a place? Joan was only a child, so it's a bit different for her, but what was it like for you, as they say, when you lived down there? I enjoyed it, but once again, same problem. Neighbours never spoke to me all the time I was there. More importantly, didn't respond when I said good morning, did a sort of... Tim in Worsley says, "Yeah, that living down south," he said. "I lived in Wilmslow for a while. It was all right." Very good. Oh, we like that, yes. A little joy to keep us going. And who is it? David says, "So the right-wing Tory think tank Policy Exchange, described as David Cameron's favourite think tank, recommends that us Northerners, if we want to improve our lifestyle, should move south. Is this an attempt to boost the southern housing market, or, as the population of northern towns is reduced, they will automatically lose a number of MP seats? Though Policy Exchange is a registered charity, with an income incidentally of £1 million in 2006, it does not reveal the sources of its funding. Personally, I expect they're not from up north. Anyway, thank you for that, David. What do you say? Should we all move south? That'll teach the beggars, won't it? 12 on BBC Radio Manchester. Mark Edwardson's got the headlines.
The mother and stepfather of 7-year-old Kyra Ishak from Birmingham, who allegedly starved to death, is to be charged with her murder. A father from Manchester says he doesn't blame his daughter for calling police when he slapped her as a form of chastisement, even though he ended up with a criminal record and lost his job as a community worker. And an Irish woman was among 3 foreign aid workers shot dead in an ambush near the Afghan capital, Kabul. Manchester's weather: showers, some sunny spells, cool though, temperatures up to about 18 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, if you're heading through the Golborne area of Manchester, be aware of some slight hold-ups on the East Lancs Road. The A580 still looking fairly delayed around the junction with Stonecross Lane South on the approach to these traffic lights that have failed. They've been out of action now for a couple of hours, and as I say, it's looking fairly delayed in the immediate area. Aside from that, though, motorway traffic all coping fairly well. M56 traffic, for instance, between Junction 7 at Bowden, heading towards Manchester, moving at a nice steady speed. And again, no problems to report on the M66 or the M61. Don't forget, though, if you know different, maybe you're stuck in a jam that I've not mentioned, call in and update us on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Marvellous woman. Marvellous.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic. BBC Radio Manchester.
Linda in Oldham. Hiya, Linda.
I was born and bred down London.
Oh, were you?
Yes.
What are you doing up here then? We're fussy, you know.
What it was, I met my boyfriend up here.
Yeah.
Through Data Link and that. Because he's a
Through Data Link?
Yes, through Data Link.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, I'll talk to you about that after, but go on, tell me about being up here.
I've got 4 sisters, and we've all met through Data Link. We have. And my boyfriend, he was a Yorkshire, and I used to live down south in Essex. And I had my house when my mum died and that, and I moved up here and that. But I think when I come up here, I think I got more stick moving up here because they couldn't understand me. And I've learned a load of new words, like when they give you a change, and they say put it in your skyrocket. I thought, what's that word? And muffins and all that.
Skyrockets?
Yeah.
Cockney rhyming slang.
But I've never heard that before.
Have you not? Well, we make our own up here, of course, and pretend it's Cockney rhyming slang.
So up here, they said, you go shop for some muffins. I said, what's muffins? We used to call them barn cakes after everything down there.
Yeah, muffins is a strange one, yeah. But how did people treat you? Did they treat you like you were a weirdo?
Some do, yeah. Some parts of London, they do, and that. Some parts of London are very stuck up and everything, and that. It depends what part of London you live in and everything and that.
Yeah, where were you?
I was in Essex. So I used to live in Essex. Then we lived in Windsor and that.
Now, Windsor's posh. I've been there.
Yeah, well, near Windsor Castle we used to live and that.
I went to Windsor to make a film about the Queen's backyard when she slagged off Manchester. She was in Russian and she slagged it off. So I went to Windsor to make a little television report about Windsor. And it's dead posh, and we had to hunt high and low for the Windsor Labour Club. And it was like the upstairs back bedroom of a 2 up, 2 down, you know, it wasn't exactly huge.
It's the same now I'm up here. I still have to talk slow because they don't understand me. They don't. Because many times they say, where do you come from? I says, I come from London. They say, well, you're a Cockney then, aren't you? I said, yeah, I am. But I still go down there because I've got my brother down there. And I've got my sister down there. Now, I went down about 3 weeks ago, and she said to me, you're losing your Cockney accent, you, aren't you? She said, they're proper Cockneys, they are.
Ah, right, so they'll not be able to understand you now.
No, so...
And what's with this data link? What drove you to that?
So what it is, I used to live at home, there's 7 of us there were, and I used to live at home with my mum, and they got married and that. When my mum died... and that, I said, right, I never used to go out or anything and that. So one Sunday, I saw it in the paper, and it said, join a data link and everything and that. So I joined it, like every month it were. It said, you so many different fellas. And the one I'm going with now, he rang me on a Sunday, and he said to me, do you fancy writing and meeting up? So I said, yeah. So he wrote for quite a while. So I said, if you want to meet me, I said, you come to London. So he did do. And that's how we've met.
Excellent. And it's going all right?
Yeah, after 12 years.
12 years? It is going all right then, isn't it, really? Could have moved on by then. Excellent. So how much did you pay to Datalink?
It was £40.
£40?
Yeah.
12 years? That's 10 bob a year. It's well worth it. £2 a year.
£40 for about 3 months it were. And
Yeah.
every month, or every so often, you get different fellas ringing and writing to you and that. It was all right.
Sounds it. Good on you. Good to talk to you, Linda.
Right, see you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. There you are. Linda's from down south, moved up here. Don't think it's too bad at all. Ted in Moston, I want to move a bit further south than one Cal Bolshevik Cameron suggests. I like that, one Cal Bolshevik. In fact, it's about as south as you can get. South Africa. Well, Ted, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's nowhere near as south as you can get. It's as south as you can get, probably, walking without getting too wet. But I think Australia, New Zealand, even if you don't mind the damp or the cold, even, yeah, you could go to South Antarctica, couldn't you? Yeah. Or Chile, where it sometimes is. Or you could go to Van Diemen's Island. There's loads of places further south than South Africa, so I'm not having that, sorry. 0161 228 2255. Christopher says, I listened to yesterday's programme last night on the internet. On the question of the National Health Service, I say yes. It's time for it to go. I wouldn't stop there. I would abolish the whole of the welfare state along with the privatisation of all public services. The objections to such don't take into account the fact that our country cannot continue on its current course. If we do not stop the handout system now, all the horrors ascribed to laissez-faire capitalism falsely will manifest themselves in our society as they already are. Let us return our country to a freedom better than that enjoyed by the British in the 19th century. 0161 228 2255. A freedom by the British enjoyed in the 19th century. I'm not altogether sure that there was much freedom knocking about in Britain in the 19th century. There was the freedom to have worms and rickets. There was the freedom to die after 1.5 score rather than 70. There was a freedom for the rich to do what they wished, including raping and pillaging foreign lands, but also raping and pillaging the daughters of the sons of toil of this land. In the 18th century, people were effectively owned by the gentry. So no, I'm sorry, I don't agree that we were free. Now, you may have a case for dismantling the welfare state. That case is one worth of arguing, worth discussing, worth considering. But the suggestion that we should do it simply because we want to return to the freedoms enjoyed by the British in far-flung times, no way. They just were not free. Alan, I lived in Perth, Australia. That's down south, isn't it? It was okay, so says Peter. How did you get on down the salt mine? Dave in Culcheth. It was good. It was brilliant, in fact. I enjoyed it. It was quite a bit scary. We had to wear tin hats. Well, they're not tin, are they? But we had to wear hard hats and goggles. Always you had to wear your goggles. Because there was salt. It's a salt mine. The air was full of salt. In fact, you were allowed to take photographs down there, so I took some. And actually, I should have put one on the web. Should have put a photo of Beswick down the mine on the web. It's quite scary. I can't do it today. I'll have to do it tomorrow. I'll put a photo of Beswick down the mine on the web, he said, in a voice that made it sound like he knew whether that was possible. Hey, anyway, I'll do that. We'll put it on. What do I care? The thing's took. And maybe the BBC will give me a few quid for the copyright. You never know. No? OK. Anyway, we'll do that. Yeah, right, thank you. We'll do that. We'll put one on the web tomorrow if I get it organised. or if I remember. Anyway, if you take a photograph down the salt mine with a flash, given that it's dark, you would need a flash, you'd think. If you take a salt mine photograph with a flash, all you get is a photograph of loads of little dots, hundreds and hundreds of little dots, because the salt floating about in the air picks up the flash or reflects the flash, and that's all you get. You can't see anything beyond that. So you have to do it without a flash, which took me a long while to learn. But once I'd learned it, it was all right. Except, of course, it's dark. So you have to hold the camera very, very still when there's even a little bit of light for you to take a photograph by. Anyway, I'll do that. I'll put one on tomorrow, if I remember. And it was good. I mean, I know people have been on and said they've been down. It was bigger than I thought, even though people warned me about it or told me about it. It was a lot bigger than we thought. First of all, you go down in an ordinary lift. So that was a fun. The getting ready was a bit disconcerting, because you have to do a little safety talk. You have to listen to a safety talk, and you have to learn how to use your oxygen supply. They give you an oxygen supply that you have to carry about. You wear a belt, and on this belt is the oxygen supply and the huge battery for your lamp, because you have to have a lamp as well on account of it being dark. And you wear this big leather belt, and it weighs, everything put together, this leather belt weighs a stone, 14 pound. It's heavy. Yeah. And you have to waddle around with that, and you're not allowed to take it off. And they give you a coat, so you look like the inspector, except it's blue. I wanted a white one. But they give you a blue coat. No, not like them, not the... We weren't at Pontins, but they give you a blue coat, you put that on, and then you put your big belt on, and then you put your lamp on, then you put your oxygen on and learn how to use it and all that, and then they give you have a toggle, a little toggle, like getting into security places at work. You have this toggle, and then you come out the lamp room with your toggle, and you have to put your toggle against a clicker, and it lets you go through one of them spiky gates, a turnstile that they have at football. So you go through that, and then you're in the lift. You're in the lift, and it travels down pretty sharpish for a minute, which is not long. I could cope with that, and did. And in that time, it travels the distance, if you like, that if you were in the lift going up Blackpool Tower. It's about the same distance. A little bit quicker, though. So that was that. So down we went. And when we got to the bottom, I was expecting, right, we'll get going now. There was a truck. There was a minibus with the roof cut off. They called it an open-top bus, which it was. It was just a minibus with the roof cut off. So we got in that. I mean, they'd done something so you didn't cut your hands on it. We got in that and battered our minibus, and off we chugged. All over this mine. It's absolutely huge. It goes on. I'm not exaggerating. It goes on for miles. There are apparently in excess of, and I say in excess of because they've not measured it lately, because obviously it grows every day as they take about 1 million tons of salt out of that mine every year. About 1 million. Some days it's £1 or 2 under. Some years it's £1 or 2 over. But they take about 1 million pounds, 1 million tons of salt out that mine every year. So it grows fairly quickly. But even at the last measurement, which was at the beginning of the year, there's an excess of 130 miles of roadway. Yeah, 130 miles of roadway under Cheshire. Absolutely. So it's a long way. In fact, at one point, we'd got a bit behind our recording schedule because we're supposed to be recording people all over the place, all over the mine. You know, we went to the cutting place where they actually cut the rock salt, where the mining goes on with this dirty, great big lawnmower-like machine. So we went there. We also had to go to the place where they do the deep storage, where they store documents for, well, all sorts of things. The National Archives down there. And just local solicitors can store stuff there. It's quite cheap as well, incidentally, if you're thinking of using it, but there you are. But it's ideal for storing documents, apparently. So we had to go there, and then we had to go to the place where they store the low toxic waste. So it's not very toxic, but it's a bit toxic, so they've got that. They've been storing that there since 2004. We went to that. And we got a bit behind schedule, and they said, well, we're going to miss somebody out and then come back to them, because we've got to go to this other place, because they're about to knock off. And we said, well, that's all right. How long will it take? And he said, well, in the minibus, quarter of an hour. We were a quarter of an hour in a minibus driving from one part of the mine to another, and we weren't going from extremity to extremity, so in a quarter of an hour. That's a long time. You know, you imagine quarter of an hour in a car. When I drove there from here in Manchester, where I am, to Winsford, where that is, and where some of you are, that took me about 35 minutes. Yes, I did go quick, but it's all motorway. Anyway, it took me about 35 minutes. So imagine the distance underground of driving for a quarter of an hour. It was a long, long way. Anyway, it was absolutely fantastic. And that's it. So it was good. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be, because it is. The tunnels, the roadways are wide, and they're quite high. They're about 20 foot high. So you didn't feel claustrophobic. And the thing that I was really scared of was what's called I've forgotten its proper name now, but it's the safety room, the room you go into when all hell lets loose. Not that it ever has, incidentally, but if all hell lets loose, you go into this room. And I was expecting, effectively, a cell, you know, like a prison cell, 8B, 8B8. That's what I was expecting. Because that's what it would have been if it was in a coal mine. That's the kind of area they could protect. But no, this was huge. Huge. Big enough for 50 people to survive for 60 hours. There was food in there. There were water. There were toilets. OK, there were chemical ones, but there were toilets. Anyway, so you went in this room, and 60 people could survive in there for... 50 people could survive in there for 60 hours. And that would be whilst the air changed outside in the mine. So anyway, it was great fun, and we made a programme about it. That'll be getting edited and scripted and all the rest of it over the next few months, and who knows, you might hear it one day. We shall see. So, in answer to your question, what was it like down the mine? It was a very, very interesting experience. It was almost fun, and fortunately, I've now crossed it off the list and won't have to go again. Unless, of course, we have to do some re-recording, and then I'll have to go through all that psyching up again. We were down there for getting on for 5 hours. That's like 2.5 working days for me. We were down there for 5 hours, and it was great, and thank you to all the people there, because they were fantastic. But it was good fun. I liked it. And I didn't catch his name, but if the gentleman who was in the lamp room when we were getting our lamps, if Mrs. Lamp Room Minor is listening, I said I'd say hello, but I never got his name, so I don't know how I was going to do that, but there you are. Because he said, hey, Beswick, my wife listens to you. Yeah, I know. I told him. I tried to put it. Told him get shut of it. Clearly not right. Neil, in Bebbington, yesterday, a local bank, which is just down the road in Rock Ferry... See, Bebbington, Rock Ferry, on the Whittle. Anyway, she's down the road in Rock Ferry, got robbed. The robber walked in, armed with a knife, and tackled the security guard carrying the cash. During this, a have-a-go hero got a good stabbing. Well, not so good in this case. And despite the best efforts of Airwolf 1, or whatever Merseyside police call their flying pride and joy, the robber was not found. The have-a-go hero is currently in hospital. It serves the daft git right, says Neil. He's lucky to be alive. I cannot understand people who put themselves and others at risk over bits of paper. In my view, you have to be a total imbecile to jump someone who has some big horrible bladed thing, or worse, over some bank's cash. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. If anything, it warrants, should we say, if anything warrants mockery, it's the fact that they're doing it for, well, somebody else's money. Not only somebody else's money, but the bank's money. You would hope that an individual such as the one who's now lying in hospital with stab wounds, you would hope that individual would intervene if he saw an old lady getting battered or something of that ilk. You would hope that that would be done, would you not? However, saving or getting involved to save somebody's money, why? It's just money. It's just cash. And not even people's cash. Do you know what I mean? It's the bank's cash. Well, the banks have got tons and tons and tons of cash. And even, if I remember correctly, even that cash is... Well, the bank even recommends that you don't intervene. So it says to its staff, don't intervene, don't involve. We don't want any heroes. People who work on security vehicles, it's the same thing. We don't want any heroes. Don't let them take it. Let them take it. So, is he right? Is Neil right that the man's an idiot and should have left well alone? What do you say? 0161 228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And, of course, you can text us on 07786 206 951. Although I believe in disciplining children, says Patricia from Altrincham, smacking is not the way to do so. If you want to build a relationship with children, you don't smack them. Adults are hypocrites when it comes to discipline. There are many times I feel like getting out of the car and smack drivers on the mobile phone whilst driving. I wondered if at work I would have get away with smacking another adult. Adults are the most unruly people, and yet we seem to be making so much of an issue of unruly children. Spending time talking and doing things with children, making them feel loved and wanted, would have positive results. And setting examples would definitely be the way forward. Alan, I could give you other examples of unruly adults, and yet no one seems concerned about adults' behaviour. That upsets children and causes them to misbehave. Let's start by flogging adults in public for their bad behaviours. That, in turn, may send the message to children that bad behaviour of any kind is not acceptable. Well, is it? Is that the way forward? Are we going to start beating the adults now? Surely it's perfectly acceptable to slap a child. You would do it with, I hesitate to say this, you'd do it with a dog. You'd do it with a creature that you want it to learn by rote. You don't intellectualise the difficulties. And how do you do it with a tiny child? How do you intellectualise a 2-year-old? You can't. You can't sit there with a 2-year-old, can you? And discuss it. Look, this is how we do it. That's how we do it. You can't do it. So why should you expect it? And don't we just eventually just say, well, hang on a minute, you're misbehaving, so frankly, slap, it's over. And even if we say that's not the right way, even if that's what we say, it's not the right way, then okay, it's not the right way. But surely we shouldn't prosecute someone who slaps his child once, should we? Audrey in Gatley says, in 1932, my maternal grandmother was free to die, aged 53, in the workhouse. She was free. I expect that this was because she was a widow. I don't think it was her fault. It's getting on for 1:15. The news. Or not.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
If you're using the M62 between Junction 9 at Winwick all the way through to Junction 12 at the Eccles interchange, not much to hold you back. Traffic seems to be moving at a nice, steady pace. If you're using the A580 East Lancs Road, though, through Golborne, watch out for some localised delays around Stonecross Lane South. The traffic lights are still out there this afternoon. And in Didsbury, Palatine Road has been closed off, it seems, because of a fallen tree around Barlow Road. Please, for the moment, are redirecting traffic in the area. So again, watch out for some delays. Don't forget, if you can update me further, call in on the travel line. The number you need, of course, is 0161 244 4951. I'm Carla Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester, Sports with Will Perry.
Good afternoon. Well, let's check in at the cricket, or the lack of, I should say. Lancashire's county championship match with Yorkshire should eventually get underway this afternoon. The Red Rose take on Yorkshire for day 2 at Old Trafford. There was no play, of course, on the first day of the Roses match due to the rain yesterday, and we had the same situation this morning. Chris Malaban has the latest.
No play so far today on day 2 at Old Trafford. Frustration then for a couple of hundred fans patiently sitting in the sun waiting for play to begin, together with 22 players desperate to get on the park and start fighting for valuable points. Factoring yesterday's washout into the mix, it means that a positive result in this match appears unlikely, unless of course captains Stuart Law and Darren Gough are adventurous and decide to forfeit an innings each. Umpires Alan Jones and Graham Burgess are inspecting in just 5 minutes' time. Here's hoping for play to commence in early afternoon.
We'll be live at Old Trafford as soon as those covers come off. Well, Mark Hughes insists he's staying at Manchester City, despite reports he's ready to quit as Blues boss due to a lack of control over transfers and a lack of funds for new additions. However, he says there is speculation around the club, and that has been prevalent since I joined, but I'm very focused on what I am about and what I aim to achieve here, and that means success on the pitch. Well, meanwhile, former City chairman John Wardle has backed his decision to sell the club to Thaksin Shinawatra. A source close to Wardle says hindsight is a wonderful thing, but at the time all the relevant tests proved that he had the funds. Well, BBC Radio Manchester's City pundit Fred Eyre feels that Shinawatra should keep the fans informed.
He's got many spokesmen, but you can't be hearing, going straight to the fountainhead. And if he was to come out and speak to the Manchester City faithful, I mean, he's used to doing it. He used to be the Prime Minister of his own country, so he's obviously quite capable of doing it. Yeah, just come in front of, or come to the game on Thursday and see, chance his arm and see what sort of a reception he gets.
Well, after a summer of speculation, Darren Fletcher says the Manchester United dressing room has warmly welcomed back the best player in the world. Cristiano Ronaldo is back with United following an ankle operation, and constant talk, of course, of a move to Real Madrid. However, Fletcher believes Ronaldo's presence for at least another season is a big boost to their ambitions.
Oh, he's the best player in the world, so the fact that he's back is great, and he's a fantastic player. He's well liked by the changing room and in the change room by the lads, and I'm sure he's glad as well that he's back and he's training and he's focused on getting back from his injury, and he'll be looking to, as we all are, looking to retain the Champions League and win the Premiership again. Ronaldo's still here and he's a great player and he's going to help us win things.
Meanwhile, United's Ji-Sung Park is expected to return to full training next week after recovering from his knee injury. The midfielder played no part in pre-season. Oldham striker Craig Davis has been suspended for 3 games following last night's red card in the Carling Cup win at Rochdale. Davis headbutted Dale's Nathan Stanton and will now miss the games with Leeds, Cheltenham and Colchester. At the Olympics, US swimmer Michael Phelps has become the greatest athlete in Olympic history, winning the 10th and 11th gold medals this morning. The 23-year-old picked up his 4th and 5th gold in Beijing, winning the 200-metre butterfly and the 4x200-metre freestyle.
Now to be the most decorated Olympian of all time, I just kept thinking, wow, greatest Olympian of all time. It's a pretty cool saying. It's a pretty cool title, I guess you could say. I'm definitely honored. It's amazing. It definitely never ever gets old listening to the national anthem play with the gold medal around your neck. It's one of the greatest feelings I've ever had in the sport of swimming.
Now Phelps will look to beat Mark Spitz's record of 7 golds at 1 Games. Great Britain have won their 2nd cycling medal on the road at the Olympics in Beijing. Emma Pooley claimed silver in the women's time trial in a time of 35 minutes, 16.01 seconds.
I can't quite believe it. It's amazing. I mean, obviously you hope, but you have to keep the hope secret because it's a little bit arrogant. So, yeah, it's going well so far. Women's cycling is back up there.
Team GB's men's Cockless 4 are through to the final this weekend. The defending champions came first in their semi-final over 2,000 metres. Alan Campbell's into the final of the men's single sculls. Campbell, who was on crutches 7 weeks ago, suffering with a knee infection, came second in his semi-final.
Absolutely ecstatic, really pleased about that. Been stepping up all week, like I said, and now we're finally here, Olympic final, first one since 1980 for the men's scullers for Great Britain. So, no, I'm absolutely ecstatic, over the moon. Hopefully more to come in the final.
Well, Britain's Gregor Tate has just finished second in his heat of the 200-metre backstroke. He's into the semi-finals, but there's been a blow for Britain's equestrian team. Michael Whittaker is out of the show jumping competition after his horse Portofino 63 became lame. The reserve horse Russell, ridden by Nick Skelton, comes into the squad of 4. Later today, Andy and Jamie Murray are in action. They're in the second round of the tennis doubles, and Great Britain's super heavyweight David Price begins his bid for gold.
This is the Northwest's biggest sports station.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Manchester City.
Having been there to witness City's first game of the UEFA Cup in the far-flung Faroes.
The new season starts in the Faroe Islands.
And in Barnsley for the second leg.
Vassell can make it 2 on the night. He goes round the goalkeeper wide position and he scores.
We'll be at Eastlands tomorrow as Mark Hughes' team take on SC Midtjylland of Denmark.
Everybody knows exactly where we expect to go this season and everybody's working hard to that end.
Our coverage starts at 7 with commentary from 7:45.
We want to get through to the next round. We want to put this tie to bed.
The all-new Manchester Sports. Live tomorrow from 7.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Good day to you.
Talking sense every lunchtime. Allan Beswick and you. BBC Radio Manchester.
Keith in Hazel Grove. Hiya, Keith.
Good afternoon, Alan.
What have you got?
Well, it's a friend of mine who's got a concern. Her person that she lives with is currently in hospital, and this friend of mine is trying to get a power of attorney or something at least that gives her the requisite, power to conduct his affairs whilst he's in there. I don't know if he's going to be in there for a long time or what. And being ex-CAB, as I know you are, I'm just thinking she can't get through to anybody that's, giving her the right advice. And I'm wondering whether she should go to see a solicitor. She's not well off, so it's a matter of, I think, finances.
Well, first of all, it depends on the individual who's in hospital. I mean, why...
Well, he's got... it's not been officially diagnosed as pre-senile dementia, but he is getting there. So before...
Is he presently compos mentis?
He is, yes.
Then it would be for him to make the decision about power of attorney. He can grant... They call it enduring power of attorney. He can grant enduring power of attorney.
How does he do that?
In simple terms, with a solicitor is the easiest and most likely to be successful way.
He's confined in hospital at the moment.
Well, solicitors do visits.
Do they go into hospital?
Oh, God, they go wherever the money is. They're just like anybody else. But, yes, they are accustomed to that. Now, I suppose not every solicitor will do it, but not every solicitor will do power of attorney anyway. But, yes, they would do home visit. I mean, you think about the people who represent those who've been smashed to bits in a car crash. Well, they don't wait for him to get better. They go and see him in hospital. So, yes, that's not a problem. But the solicitor would then apply to the relevant court for power of attorney to be granted. And what enduring power of attorney does is it sits there, if you like, on the books until such time as it becomes necessary to be used. And then it can be used.
Okay.
So...
I think a lot of this, the problem is that he's incapable of climbing stairs now, and if he were to be, which is not currently, but if he were to be released from hospital, as the social services say, he's virtually going to be homeless because they won't provide anything, and this is where there's a problem. So this is why my friend is trying to...
Well, power of attorney may not be the absolute solution to that, because... Your friend, I mean, it depends on what your friend wants to do. Does your friend want to be responsible?
I think yes. I think, I mean, they've lived together, not as a couple, you understand, but they've lived in the same house for several years, and it's just a point now where the person that's hospitalised is, if he gets discharged from hospital, he won't have anywhere to, because he can't live in the house. There's the stairs. He will not be able to climb the stairs, and it's impossible to put sort of a bed downstairs because the house isn't big enough.
Right. But how would your friend, having, for want of a better term, having authority over his affairs, how would that assist the matter? He still wouldn't be able to live downstairs.
That's true, but it's something to show the social that they're saying, look, although she's not a relative, she's just a friend and like landlord, if you will. But, she doesn't obviously want him to be kicked out and...
Well, yeah, but the social may well say, OK, you've got enduring power of attorney. That only gives you the right to make the decisions and implement them. if the house is privately owned, then I suspect that the social are not going to make any contribution that will enhance the home for her benefit. For the owner's benefit. In respect of their residential tenant. But I mean, you don't have to have a solicitor for power of attorney, enduring or otherwise. I mean, it's actually granted by state representatives, for want of a better term. The public guardian is what it's called, the office of the public guardian, and they grant it or otherwise, and it's effectively form filling. But
it has given her a letter of authority signed and witnessed, but they won't accept that.
No, they'll want the power, because they want something that can't easily be rescinded or that they can use should there be any action. Let us assume, a silly case, let us assume the social services accept a letter and they allow an individual to sell the home and use the money and all of that, and then all hell lets loose, and the person whose money it is says, hang on a minute, the social service shouldn't have done that. So they want a legal document of some recognised legal document rather than a cobbled together one.
But you made a point earlier, Alan, regarding how's this going to help him get a home or somewhere to live. I don't know whether it would. I don't know how it would help him. I haven't thought of that.
No, I don't either. I really don't see how that would assist, because he would have rights. The individual who's granted power of attorney would be able to make decisions on his behalf about those rights, but whether the social services would say, well, OK, we'll accommodate him in this one-bedroomed ground floor flat with all the equipment he requires, fine, that's done now, we've done that, and the person says, well, I want to be there to help him. Power of attorney doesn't give them the right to do that. No. The social services would need somebody residential, and it might be that individual, but nothing is cut and dried. But frankly, I wouldn't advise anybody to get even enduring power of attorney, which doesn't kick in immediately. It's a preparation for the future. I wouldn't advise anybody to do that without discussing their options with a lawyer, and the if you like, the consequences of it with a lawyer.
And can the social? I mean, I'm sorry to take away. Can the social actually, if they were to house this patient, could they do it out of the area where he currently resides?
Yeah,
they can do that.
Well, yes. I mean,
it would make it very, very difficult for.
Well, it would make it difficult, but if they say, OK, we've got a house, it's ideal for your needs, but it's not next door but one. It's not next door but two. It's not next door but three. So we've already accepted that it's not going to be in the immediate vicinity. So it's not in the next street. OK, well, where's the nearest one? The nearest one is 14 miles away.
Well, it is. It's very close, actually,
Well, OK, but do you know what I mean? What are they to do? So, all right, well, it's the back garden for you then. So they do have the power to make the offer somewhere within their remit, but they're not compelled to do it as close as possible. Although the social services are run by human beings, they're decent people. They will do their best.
I don't know whether it's helped her, whether she's any nearer now, but she's listening. But
all right,
anyway.
well, let us hope.
Thanks.
All right, good
Thanks
on
a
you.
lot, Alan.
0161 228 2255. Christopher's back with his freedom. I mean freedom in the sense of free from the initiation of physical force. Freedom in a political context doesn't and cannot mean freedom from disease, although such freedom does defeat disease. Or freedom from paying one's rent. It means the freedom to act on one's own rational judgment. Sure, some people are irrational, but in a capitalist system they cannot make the innocents pay for their mistakes. Now, the 19th century was a period when force was still used and life was difficult, but for the first time, people had hope because their actions were, on the whole, free. As an example of this technology, of the technologies we enjoy today, are the results of the minds of many men that lived during that period. Remember, the 19th century gave the longest period without a major world war. Well, that is true. They were free to invent all sorts of things. Unless, of course, they were busy digging. Or they were busy struggling.
Join me, Becky Want, today from 2 live from the Museum of Science and Industry for the last few days of the controversial Body Worlds exhibition.
Oh, that's a fabulous exhibition. Get to see it if you can. It really is stunning. 0161228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk and 07786 206 951.
95.1 FM, DAB Digital Radio, and the World Wide Web. This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, a Manchester father forgives his daughter after chastisement leads to a criminal record. And unemployment's up, and there's a warning inflation may take months to bring under control.
And the ground staff are working overtime at Old Trafford. The War of the Roses should start after lunch.
Well, this afternoon we will see 1 or 2 showers around. There is quite a bit of cloud here and there, but the cloud will break from time to time, and we will see the odd bright or sunny interval. It does feel cool, though, with top temperatures getting to just 17 Celsius.
And if you're heading along Palatine Road at the moment, be aware that the carriageway is closed off at the junction with Barlow Moor Road, so you will be redirected around because of a fallen tree across the carriageway.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Edwardson. Would you be as forgiving as this? A father from Manchester says he doesn't blame his daughter for calling police when he slapped her as a form of chastisement. Jim McCulloch from Wythenshawe lashed out at 13-year-old Jess after she'd been banging on a neighbour's window at midnight. Mr McCulloch's ended up with a criminal record that's ruined his career as a community worker. Dave Guest has spoken to both of them.
It was done to shock her. I don't condone physical punishment, but, you know, being a parent is very, very difficult, and you have to make some very difficult choices.
I was scared.
So what did you do?
I went upstairs and informed the police.
Why?
Because it's the first time that it's ever hit me, and that's what my dad's taught me to do.
The mother and stepfather of a 7-year-old girl from Birmingham who allegedly starved to death is to be charged with her murder. The couple are already facing another charge in connection with the death of Kyra Ishak. There's criticism of a right-wing think tank that says you should seriously consider leaving Oldham, Rochdale and Bolton because, it claims, economic regeneration has failed. Policy Exchange is closely allied to the Conservative Party. It says you should consider a future in Oxford, Cambridge or London instead. These people in Farnworth had this to say.
I think it's a complete nonsense. I just don't know where they're coming from, that sort of thinking.
It's disgusting. There's nothing wrong with Bolton. At all.
Well, Oxford and Cambridge, you're talking about 2 nice places. As far as moving to London, no, definitely not.
We hate London.
Hate it.
The number of people out of work and claiming benefits has seen its biggest monthly rise in more than 15 years. The number of job seekers allowance claimants rose by more than 20,000 in July, taking the total to almost 865,000. The Governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, is warning you the economic conditions over the next few months will be difficult and painful. Delivering the bank's quarterly inflation forecast, he said the cost of living would rise further before starting to fall again next year. But he suggested there was light at the end of the tunnel, as Pauline McCall reports.
Inflation will rise to 5%, economic growth will slow almost to a halt, but we will avoid a recession, and in 2 years' time the rate of inflation will be back under control. That's assuming all goes in accordance with the Bank of England's own economic forecasts. The government could rock the boat with some financial giveaway, but it's assumed that won't happen. This is a message of reassurance from Mervyn King. He does warn there is no going back to the benign economic conditions of the recent past, the nice decade, but he talks instead of a year or two from now when the UK's financial landscape will look, in the Governor's words, not so bad.
Russian tanks have been on the move in the Georgian town of Gori just hours after Moscow and Tbilisi agreed to a European-led ceasefire. The town borders the separatist region of South Ossetia, which has been at the centre of the conflicts between Georgia and Russia. Our correspondent, Gavin Hewitt, is just outside the town and he's seen the tanks.
They seem to be dismantling and destroying Georgian army bases there. But we're getting a stream of eyewitness reports that their allies, South Ossetian forces, are looting the city. There is a pall of smoke over the market. We have heard of people being stripped of everything at gunpoint. And the situation may well be worse in outlying villages. We have spoken to terrified residents who have watched their houses being torched.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Well, the Old Trafford ground staff have been working around the clock of late. That's continued this afternoon as they try frantically to soak up the water on the outfield for Lancashire's County Championship match with Yorkshire. And we do have a start time, Chris Mellaband.
Indeed we do, Will. 2:10 will be the time that Yorkshire and Lancashire will finally be able to lock horns here. 64 overs to be bowled on day 2 today. We await news of the toss to see who will be batting first, but at least we're going to get some cricket at 2:10.
Well, we'll be live at Old Trafford throughout the afternoon. Manchester United midfielder Ji-Sung Park is expected to return to full training next week after recovering from a knee injury. Park played no part in pre-season. Oldham striker Craig Davis has been suspended for 3 games following last night's red card in the Carling Cup win at Rochdale. Davis headbutted Dale's Nathan Stanton and will now miss the game with Leeds, Cheltenham and Colchester. Great Britain have won their second cycling medal on the road at the Olympics in Beijing. Emma Pooley claimed silver in the women's time trial. Team GB's men's coxless 4 are through to the final this weekend. The defending champions came first in their semi-final over 2,000 metres. And later today, Andy and Jamie Murray are in action. They're in the second round of the tennis doubles.
BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, this afternoon we will see 1 or 2 showers around. There is quite a bit of cloud here and there, but the cloud will break from time to time, and we will see the odd bright or sunny interval. It does feel cool, though, with top temperatures getting to just 17 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. How are you? Are you well? Good. 0161 228 2255. You want to talk about anything under the sun, that's fine. I'm here to listen and discourse and all of those things. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk if you'd prefer to do it via the email system. And you can do it on the text as well on 07786 206 951. Alan, says Lee in Liverpool, we had you telling us about you being shafted by Les Dawson last week. Now I've got the image of you playing with your toggle underground. I'm having me dinner, says Lee. And that lady earlier said people from Liverpool were funny. Weird. And Steve in Rochdale, I hope the lad who got stabbed in the bank stands by and watches in future if he witnesses your listener getting mugged for his wallet. End of the day, it's only money. Crime is a crime, and if everyone stopped others committing crimes, well, if nothing else, it'd be fun to watch. Yeah, I mean, it's when do you get involved, isn't it, really? Yes, if you see an individual being harmed, and mugging is harm, if you see an individual being harmed, then yes, you would hope to have the courage to get involved and take the consequences. You would hope. I don't know whether I've got the courage, I suspect not, but you would hope. But getting involved when it's commercial money, why? Why, it's just commercial money. Let us say they get away with £25,000 from the Allan Beswick Bank. Well, most of the banks I hear reporting their profits, they're £1 billion, £2 billion. One bank reported a profit of £6 billion. Yeah, profit, not turnover, profit, £6 billion. Why should you, or anyone else for that matter, risk their life to save 25 grand of that? That's the issue. Now, how do you make the decision on the day? How do you think? Or is it just a natural instinct? You're one of those sorts of people. There they are, there's trouble going on. You get involved. Sheila in Urmston says, if we expect parents to take responsibility for their children, how can we prosecute them when they do? All that daughter has learned is that she can do what she wants with no comeback. She's talking about the man you heard about from Mark in the news, where he's been prosecuted. Well, he's accepted a caution for assaulting his child, and that's given him a criminal record, because a caution is the first, if you like, it's a criminal record of the lowest order, but it's still a criminal record. An assault on a child, his own child, but still an assault, still a child. So he's accepted that, and he has got a criminal record as a result. That affects what he does for a living, and indeed what he does in his pastime for a good few years to come. He could, of course, have refused to accept the caution and gone to court instead. I mentioned, when talking to Keith earlier, enduring power of attorney. Well, I've done some research, only a little bit. Not much. The organisation that grants such thing is the Public Garden, the Office of the Public Guardian, and the Mental Capacity Act, I'm reading this, I don't know it, the Mental Capacity Act replaces enduring powers of attorney, EPAs, with a new and different power of attorney called a lasting power of attorney. And this means that you can't make any changes to an existing EPA or make a new one. However, if you have an unregistered EPA, it can still be used, and your attorney will need to register it with the OPG if they have reason to believe you are or are becoming mentally incapable in the future. You can also make an LPA to run alongside an EPA. Dear God, this is getting a lot more complicated than I thought, which is why I said at the outset it really would be best to get a lawyer. 0161 228 2255. Good day to you.
Join in the congestion conversation.
Tomorrow morning we're at Bolton Market.
Bolton Market.
I'm Jonathan Alley. Come and tell me what you think about Greater Manchester's big decision.
Charge or no charge? No charge. Tell us what you think. Manchester's congestion charge station is BBC Radio Manchester.
David says, as human beings, all we can do is what is right for us all. A slap given with love is a lot different to the other. It's a reversion to animal instincts, but we're all tied to that. That's one of our multiples of David's. And hang on a minute, I'm reading this first because of the headline. After seeing the local press, the couple being watched having sex in office time for 20 minutes could have put my name forward for any position or positions within the company. I'm willing to do overtime at the normal rate. That's Peter in Spain. He's been a great help, hasn't he? Exactly. Yes. And I know what he's got in mind, and frankly, I don't think it's good. Keith in Blackpool. Alan, I was a chief in the Royal Navy and rented a house in Cowplain. That place doesn't exist. Cowplain doesn't exist. You don't fool me. In Hampshire, I've never heard of it, and I lived in Hampshire for a little while. Anyway, he was renting a house in Cowplain, Hampshire. On the day we moved in, the guy next door was in the front garden. I said, "Hello, we're your new neighbours." He just looked at me, turned around, and walked indoors. We had 3 little girls, aged 2 to 7. It was really difficult not saying anything when the girls spoke to the couple, who were aged about 50. They just blanked the children. How can you explain to young kids that kind of behaviour? Keith in Blackpool. The answer is you can't, can you? Fancy doing that, even if they don't like you. Even if they really dislike you. It wouldn't kill them to say hello to your kids. I mean, it's just courtesy, isn't it, really? But we don't go much on courtesy these days. Or even in them days, in a lot of thought. 30 mile per hour. If you're doing 30 mile per hour for a quarter of an hour, you do 7.5 miles. And this is related to my visit underground yesterday, it seems. So there's the sums of it. Apparently, well, it's easy to work out. 30 miles in 1 hour, 15 miles in half an hour, 7.5 miles in quarter of an hour. You can't challenge his arithmetic. He makes the presumption of 30 miles per hour. I don't know whether we didn't look at... I didn't look at the speedo. I was in the back of the bus. I didn't look... It felt quick. It felt quick, but then we were underground. It would feel quick. They even... I only saw one set, to be honest, but they even had traffic lights underground. As I say, just one set of traffic lights. But they had them nonetheless. Underground, I know. And hasn't your caller wondered why in the 19th century we were sending slaves abroad, but apparently not needing them in the UK? Could the reason be there was no market for slaves here? We had our own. They were called the working class. We're back to, I think it was Chris, but my apologies if it wasn't, but we're back to Chris and his emails suggesting that we do away with the welfare state and that would make us free, and we would continue to be free, and we would be free, even as free as we were as Britons in the 19th century. I'm not altogether sure that it's a good foundation for a defence to say, yes, we want to go back to what it was like in 1790. It doesn't really sell it to me. I don't know about you, but it doesn't sell it. Yes, people died of disease and all that, but we were the chattels of our masters, weren't we? So, no, the feudal system was, to a large extent, still in operation in those days. I'm being careful here. I love it. You don't have to read this out, but it's relevant to what you just said. Oh, very good. I stayed with a relative in Spain recently. He told me that his uncle really enjoyed working in a coal mine. When he retired, he missed it so much he came out of retirement and went back to work. They do. They do. Miners... I mean, I met some yesterday. It's a bit different now because it's very industrialised. Some of the miners in Cheshire, in the Cheshire salt mines yesterday, they were from all over the planet. They were South Africans, they were Germans, they were all sorts of people. I was talking to a lad who worked there for 40 years, and he told me that. I didn't know. He said they've all changed. But I did some radio programmes with coal miners, and they absolutely loved it. The ones that, if you like, got into it, because there's a good few go down there and do one day and never go down again, and there's a few that, you know, they have a couple of days and they can't be doing with it. But the ones that get into it, the ones that really, really get into it and start to class themselves as miners, yeah, there is a fantastic camaraderie. And... well, there would be, because it's a bit like the forces, if they're, you know, you talk to the lads who fought in the Second World War, and I don't think many of them say they were the best days of their lives, but they made friends and relationships then that lasted until now, because they were all in the same muck together. They developed a bond, and they had to develop a bond, because if they didn't, they died. You needed your buddy, as the Americans call him. They worked on a system of you're all part of one. And the military still do that in conflict. It doesn't demonstrate itself as well or manifest itself as well in peacetime, but it's the same in the mines. You need your mates. You need your mates to help make your living, but you need your mates to stay alive as well. Absolutely crucial. How say you? 0161 228 2255. Whether the bonds are the same down the salt mines now, I suspect not, frankly. But yeah, they were. The miners we met, we were doing a series of programmes about the lives of a mining town. It was called Houghton, just a subdivision of Barnsley, not Bradford, and the colliery was Houghton, Maine. It was closed. One of the 25 that Hasseltine stood up one day and said we're going to close 25 mines, or was it 75? I can't remember now, but it was an awful lot. And we did a programme about the lives of the miners as their pit closed, and yeah, they were devastated. It wasn't just a very large part of it, but it wasn't just the loss of income. It wasn't just the loss of something to do every day. It was the loss of the respect they had for themselves as, what do you do? I'm a miner. So it was the loss of that, the loss of a piece of their personality, the way they defined themselves. So that was important, but also the loss of that relationship, that shared understanding, that idea that, OK, so you've had a row about football, you've had a row about your kids, you've had a row with your wife or whatever, but down here, they said, you've all got to work together whether you like one another or not, because if one of us gets hurt, we're all involved. So that was enormous. And I met one about a year later, and he'd always been extremely proud of being a miner. He'd always expected to be a miner all his life. That's all he ever been as a child. Well, when I leave school, I'll go down pit, because that's what you do in that village. And he did. And he'd worked down the pit for 20 years or so. Long time to be going underground every day. And then the pit closed. Lost his job, was unemployed for a while, got a wad of money, got a right wedge, got about 25 grand, 30 grand, something like that. Fantastic wedge. And eventually got a job in a factory doing what he did down the mines, which was drive a truck, a forklift truck. So that was fine. So I said to him 12 months later, well, you're not a miner anymore, are you? What am I then? I said, you're a forklift truck driver. No, I'm not, he said. I'm a miner who's driving a forklift truck. So, yeah, you're right. You're right. There is a camaraderie. Whether it's the same now in the... Have we still got a coal mine? We've got drift mines, but they're just tractors and drivers, aren't they, really? But if we had a coal mine, would it be the same? I suspect it would. 0161 228 2255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and of course the text number 07786 206 951. You can talk about anything. You can even talk about the Chinese kid who was, according to one newspaper headline, far too ugly to sing. Doesn't that apply to quite a lot of our pop singers? 20 past 1 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines, Mark Edwardson.
You're being warned the next few months will be difficult and painful. It comes from the Governor of the Bank of England, who will be wrestling with the rate of inflation. There's been an angry reaction to the suggestion by a policy think tank that people living in Bolton, Rochdale and Oldham should be encouraged to move to the southeast because economic regeneration has failed. And the mother and stepfather of a 7-year-old girl from Birmingham who allegedly starved to death are to be charged with her murder. Manchester's weather, some showers, you can expect bright spells too. Highs of 18 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
If you're heading onto the M60, traffic on the Ring Road moving at a nice steady speed for the moment, but if you're travelling around the Didsbury area of Greater Manchester, watch out for delays around Palatine Road. It's been closed off now since around about 25 to 1 around the junction with Barlowmore Road because of a fallen tree across the carriageway. Police are still redirecting traffic in the area. Not doing too badly on the M61 between junction 8 at Chorley all the way down towards Swinton Interchange, where it meets up again with the M60. Don't forget, though, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
2020 traffic means you get an update every 20 minutes through the day. BBC Radio Manchester.
Mark says via email, no play at Old Trafford again. How crap are the covers and the drainage system, and indeed the ground staff at Old Trafford, that it could have got in 3 to 4 hours play in yesterday afternoon's sunshine. And now, today, after a sunny morning, there won't be any play until 1:40, just in time for the afternoon's predicted rain. 20 minutes after it stops raining at Lord's or the Oval, they're playing again. No wonder Old Trafford has just lost its test match status. Interesting. I don't know why they can't play in the rain. They don't stop rugby or even football. It's a bit of a girls' blouse game. They don't stop them, do they? Why can't they play cricket in the rain? They could put a pulley on if it's a bit cold. I don't understand that. It would make it harder. Of course it would make it harder. But is that what we're about now? Making the sport easy? It'd just be tough. So, all right, you get a bit wet. Well, apparently Cowplain is about 2 miles north of Waterlooville. Well, that's not helped. I don't know where Waterloo... Oh, hang on. Waterlooville. And about 10 miles north of Portsmouth. Right, well, I'm all right now. I can cope with 10 miles north of Portsmouth. I can understand where that is, but Waterlooville? Cowplain? I didn't even know they existed. Anyway, you're glad you're not there, so we're glad you're not there as well. 0161 228 2255. We talked a lot about cancer drugs in the last few days. According to the Daily Mail today, and it's interesting, I'd love to know how they find these things out, but a cheap drug used to treat brittle bones helps halt breast cancer in its track, according to scientists yesterday. When used with a common chemotherapy drug, the tumours all but stopped growing. That all but's a bit wary, isn't it? But all but stopped growing. And the cancer remained at bay even after treatment had finished. The results were so dramatic that researchers believe the combination could be better at fighting the disease than any drug cocktail already in use. And with the bone drug, zoledronic acid, My apologies if it's mispronounced. Costing under £1,000 a year for treatment, less than 1/20th of the breast cancer wonder drug Herceptin, the price shouldn't be a problem for the NHS. How do they find that out? Are they treating a patient who's got the brittle bone disease with the drug? And whilst treating them, they discover, well, OK, this patient's also got breast cancer. And yet, once they started getting the brittle bone treatment, the breast cancer stopped developing. And they think, what caused that? Well, let's have a look at this. Because it's not the kind of thing... You wouldn't sit down in the lab, would you, and think, oh, let's try this out? Because, well, it would just be a bit balmy, wouldn't it? Well, it would, because you'd think, well, aspirin... Mind you, they've done it with aspirin, haven't they? Aspirin was a painkiller. Now it's given, and you have to be wary, now it's given to get people to... thins the blood, if you like, and diminishes their risk of a heart attack. Quite extraordinary. And again, presumably found by accident. Maybe another think tank will suggest a movement out of the southeast up to the north of England. The BBC have made a good start by moving to Salford. Now we can move the Houses of Parliament to perhaps Sunderland or Middlesbrough. This would make a big difference in the price of MP's second homes investment. Wouldn't it just? Wouldn't have to make... It'd also free up an awful lot of homes, about 630 to be precise, homes, in the southeast. Wouldn't it? All those houses would become available for all the people moving out of Liverpool because they've been told to by a Tory think tank. Mind you, I don't think they really listen much to Tory think tanks in Liverpool, do they? I think that's probably not their guiding light, should we say. Oh, have you seen... This is fascinating. What paper was it in? The contract, it's up for sale. Now, it's claimed by some to be the most important music contract in the world. I'll try and find it for you, but it's the contract that the Beatles signed, or no, 4 young lads who, after this contract, were called the Beatles, or at least were here it is. Let it... Oh, this is funny. The Sun, the Mirror. Let it be, Tulls. See what they did? Yeah, let it be, Teetle. This agreement is made the first day of October 1962 between NEMS Enterprises Limited, whose registered office is Walton Road in the city of Liverpool, of the first part, John Winston Lennon, address, George Harrison, address, John Paul McCartney, James Paul McCartney, we didn't know that, did we? James Paul McCartney, address, and Richard Starkey, address, of Liverpool. And then there's Harold Hargreaves Harrison, presumably Paul's dad, is it that? Harold Hargreaves Harrison. And James McCartney, again, presumably Paul McCartney's dad. Yeah, both of Liverpool. And the third part, blah, blah. The artists... I like this. The artists are desirous of performing as a group of musicians to be known as the Beatles, and pursuant thereto of taking engagements in the following branches of the entertainment industry. A. Vaudeville and revue. B. Motion pictures. C. Balls. And, steady, and dances, whether of a private or public nature. D. Radio and television broadcasting. E. Concerts, private parties, cabarets. F. Phonographic and tape recording. And G. Sponsorship projects. The artists have agreed to appoint the manager to be their manager upon the terms and conditions hereinafter appearing, and the manager has agreed to act as such manager under the said terms and conditions. That's the contract, the original contract. And there's the signatures of J.W. Lennon and George Harrison and James Paul McCartney, each of which is signed by, I think it probably says, Chris Huxley. Trying to read it. It's not easy to read. Yeah. Anyway, he was the witness, presumably a lawyer. And Richard Starkey is there as well. And Brian Epstein, a somewhat florid signature. But there you are. The late Tony Wilson signed his factory records contract with Joy Division in his own blood. Fat lot of good it did him. Anyway, and it's up for sale. And they reckon, now obviously, because it was a contract, even though it only guaranteed them 1 old penny, a farthing for each of them, for every record sold. A penny for every record sold. Now, all right, a penny, but records in them days were like 6 and 8 pence. So everybody else got the 6 and 7 pence. They got a penny, a farthing each. Good Lord. And yet they still became millionaires. But the actual contract, the 1962 document, as it's described, is now up for sale, and it's expected to fetch, just the document, which has no legal bearing anymore, just the document is expected to fetch £250,000 at auction. I reckon it'll do more than that, don't you? £250,000. I reckon that'll get $500,000. Because the barking people are out there, aren't there? There's people out there with more money than sense who'll pay that. But it's a good investment. Oh, here we go, Ted. Indeed, we were free in the 19th century. The world before 1914 was amazing by today's standards, says Ted. We were free to go anywhere in the world without a passport. If you didn't like your lot in Britain, you could escape to India, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or South Africa. Britain was the greatest country in the world, and by the end of the 19th century, almost everybody could afford a better life in the Dominions, and millions did just that. The capitalist system enabled us to govern the whole of India for nearly 200 years, with only a few thousand officials and troops. Everything else was privately owned. I hate it when lefties like you describe the growth of the empire as raping and pillaging. On the whole, the empire was one of the most benevolent political structures that has ever existed, even by modern-day standards, says Ted in Moston. So, when we were in charge of India, when we were in charge of Australia and other places, we were good for them. An interesting thought, isn't it? I mean, we went around the globe forcing, the only way of describing it is our religion on them at pain of death, often. Forcing our religion. Or we did it in the other way, the blackmail way. Yeah, we'll build you a school, but we'll also build you a church, and you will worship our God. Now, okay, the people who did that, they did so in the belief that it was the one true God, and he was a nice, comfortable white Christian. So they believed they were doing good. But this time apart, we're entitled to examine it and not say, is it acceptable because they believed they were doing good? Well, maybe it is. But we're also able to look at it and say, well, were they doing good? Was it the right way for people to behave? And if it was, then what's wrong now with Muslim extremists? Muslim extremists who believe, yeah, well, quite honestly, the best thing for the world would be if the whole world went Muslim and all the women wore, yarmulke, not yarmulkes, that's the Jews, isn't it? Yashmaks and all that caper. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And if we have to kill a few Christians or non-believers as a result, well, okay, it's a small price to pay, isn't it, really? It's perfectly acceptable. Because that sort of person believes that their belief system is better for everybody. Not just better for them, but better for the individual. So let's force it upon people. And if that means planting a few bombs and killing a few people who, frankly, would go to hell anyway, then it's a small price to pay. Christians did it. Why is it wrong for the Muslims? Exactly. So, I'm sorry, Ted, whilst I do accept that in organisational terms, yes, the taking over, even conquer, some would say, of other parts of the world, was administratively good for them. And it did turn them into creatures that were more like you and me than the tribal creatures they were at the time. But that doesn't mean it was right. And it doesn't mean that, from their judgment value, it was good. I mean, frankly, the black Americans today are better off, even now, than most of their African equals. So an ordinary, let's say a 25-year-old black American is considerably, in the main, considerably better off than a 25-year-old black Nigerian, a 25-year-old black South African, a 25-year-old black Mombasan or Kenyan. Of course he is. He's considerably better off in fiscal terms, and in terms of the education that's available to him, he's considerably better off. So that's an argument that says slavery was a cracking idea. We did the lad a favour grabbing his grandad and dragging him all the way, didn't we? We dragged him all the way to another land in chains. And OK, it was a bit of a bummer for his grandad, but frankly, it's been fine now for his descendants. His descendants have got a great life. Small sacrifice for his granddad to make, and they should be grateful. We should think fantastic, how kind of the people of the slave trade to be so generous. Hello, Alan. You, as one of 6 billion, we must do what is right. You might give your life if a person's doing something that is not right. Then you as the person to do something. Right then, you as the person to do something about it. I have faith that the human race will get it right and eventually get it right. David, I'm having a bit of trouble there. I think you've done some deleting there, and it's turned what was probably a very sensible email into, for me, gibberish. Yeah. There's a few, either you've taken some words out, or you've put some words in, but I can't make sense of it. I can't work out what you're trying to say to me. But that's fine. I don't have to be able to work it out, as long as you're happy with it. Yeah. You as one of 6 billion. We must do what is right. No, sorry. That one's beat me. But that's okay. I don't mind being beat. I've been beat before. I like being beat, brings back memories of my mum. If that salt mine reaches the M60, will the minibus have to pay the congestion charge if it passes under it? He refers, of course, to the to the 130 miles. It doesn't reach it. It doesn't reach it, because the 130 miles aren't in a straight line. That's it. It doesn't reach it, or 130 miles. Actually, it would reach London. It would. It would reach London. Crewe to London is about 130 miles, right? Crewe to London is about 130 miles. And them tunnels in the mines, the roadway, are 130 miles. 0161 228 2255. What have you to say? That easy. Or Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, or you can text. It's 07786 206 951. That easy. So do it. It's quiet today. I think it's because everybody's listening to the damned Olympics. I don't really like the Olympics that much. I mean, that's synchronised swimming, synchronised diving. What is that? That's dancing, isn't it? It's dancing. It's two people trying to get the move. I understand the running can be quite exciting. I understand the running. I understand the tennis, although why we want to pay billionaires to do an amateur sport, I don't quite grasp. But dancing, synchronised swimming, no. And then you do that other one, don't you? You do the hoopla thing. You do the thing when they... Do they still do that? What they call the mats work, when they're gymnastic-y type persons, and they dance about with a stick with a ribbon on it. Do you remember that one? I mean, they're not sports. I'm sorry, but they're not. There's no reason on this earth why people shouldn't enjoy those pleasures. If they get pleasure from them, that is fine. That's fine, but Does it belong in the Olympic Games? Because, frankly, if it does, then the Olympic Games are naff. Aren't they? I mean, it's just... If you can look at it and say, well, that's how it's done. There it is. He was first, he must have won. Or they got the most proper points obeying the laws of the game. They must have won. All of that. But if somebody's got to decide, then I'll give it 5.2, I'll give it 3.8, I'll give it 6.4. Any of those things. Then it's an opinion, isn't it? It's just an opinion. It's not a judgment, it's an opinion. He's got the prettiest frock, she's got the nicest shoes. It's crazy. We're going to end up, eventually, with, like, I don't know, the tango at the Olympic Games, aren't we? That's what we're going to end up with, the tango. The waltz, why not? Why not? Why not have it? I can hear them now. The ballroom dancers saying, yes, why not? Let's have it. That's a brilliant way. Let's do it. Let's have it. Let's have dancing. We've already... Yeah, exactly. No. The Olympic Games should be about winning and losing. And, of course, coming second and third. But you know what I mean? Graham is a bit upset. And he's a bit upset because he's looked at... Well, it always upsets me when I do it. I don't blame you, mate. I get right cross about it. But the Daily Telegraph, front page. And there's a picture of Prince Charles. He's not going about Prince Charles saying that the world's going to hell in a handcart because we're not organic. We've not all gone... We're not all eating spuds with dirt on and all that. No. Although that is what the Prince Charles has said. No. What he's grumpy about is that the Prince of Wales tells the Daily Telegraph of his GM fears during an interview in Scotland. Earth faces GM crops catastrophe, warns the Prince. Multinational firms conducting a gigantic experiment that has gone seriously wrong. And all them things. Fantastic. And what does Graham write in about? Graham writes in, because Prince Charles has got a dagger down his sock. A dirk, as they call it, because he's in his kilt, you see. He's got a dirk down his sock. Dear God, he said, if I wore one of them, I'd get an houseboat. It's just, what is it? Ooh, yeah, it's about 18 minutes to 2 o'clock. Steve Saul's got the headlines.
The Governor of the Bank of England's warning you of tough economic times ahead as he tries to bring inflation back under control. His comments come on the same day as official figures show a big leap in unemployment. A Manchester man who slapped his daughter during a row about her bad behaviour says his hopes of working with young people are in tatters because of his criminal record. And Russian tanks have been on the move in the Georgian town of Gori just hours after Moscow and Tbilisi agreed to a European-led ceasefire. Manchester's weather, some showers, bright spells too, highs of 18 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Let's start out firstly on the M6, and traffic very quiet indeed between junction 18 at Middlewich all the way up towards junction 27 at Standish. The borders are with Lancashire. We're not doing too badly at all this afternoon. And no major issue on the M62 from Warrington through to Manchester, so from around about junction 8 all the way through to junction 12 at Eccles. If you're heading on to the M62 across the Pennines again, a nice steady flow of traffic between junction 18 at Sinister Island through 22 at Rushworth Moor. And don't forget these roadworks in the centre of Manchester on Key Street. You'll notice the carriageways closed either side of the road between Deansgate and Byram Street, with a diversion signed locally. Don't forget, if you can update us further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Andy May.
Live to Old Trafford first. No play so far in the Battle of the Roses, but Chris Malaband, Lancashire and Yorkshire will be playing just after 2.
Indeed, you're right, sir. Yes, after a day and a half of watching the grass grow, the 22 players can at last contemplate leather on willow. Play will commence in half an hour's time on the same wicket used for Sunday's Pro 40 debacle against Worcestershire. Stuart Law will be hoping his side can produce a much better batting display than they managed then, though whether Lancashire have the opportunity to bat first will depend on the outcome of the toss taking place now. A positive result in this match only appears likely if both captains elect to forfeit an innings. Otherwise, we appear destined for a joust for bonus points.
The latest from Old Trafford all day here here on BBC Radio Manchester. You can also keep up to date on the latest score online at bbc.co.uk/sport. Mark Hughes insists he'll remain in charge of Manchester City, despite reports suggesting he's ready to quit due to a lack of control over transfers. Hughes says he's very focused on achieving success at Eastlands. Meanwhile, John Wardle's no regrets about selling the club to Thaksin Shinawatra. A source close to the former chairman believes that the ex-Thai Prime Minister did appear to have money to spend when he bought City. With plenty of speculation concerning the club's future, Radio Manchester's City pundit Fred Eyre thinks that Shinawatra needs to keep supporters informed.
He's got many spokesmen, but you can't be hearing, going straight to the fountainhead. And if he was to come out and speak to the Manchester City faithful, I mean, he's used to doing it. He used to be the Prime Minister of his own country, so he's obviously quite capable of doing it. Yeah, just come in front of, or come to the game on Thursday and see, chance his arm and see what sort of a reception he gets.
Cristiano Ronaldo's been welcomed back into the Manchester United dressing room after a summer that's seen him constantly linked with a move to Real Madrid. Darren Fletcher's delighted the winger is back.
Best player in the world, so the fact that he's back is great, and he's a fantastic player. He's well liked by the changing room and in the change room by the lads, and I'm sure he's glad as well that he's back and he's training and he's focused on getting back from his injury, and he'll be looking to retain the Champions League and win the Premiership again. Ronaldo's still here and he's a great player and he's going to help us win things.
Ji-Sung Park's expected to return to full training next week after recovering from a knee injury. The midfielder's played no part in pre-season. After getting sent off last night in the Carling Cup for headbutting, Oldham's Craig Davis has been suspended for 3 matches. His behaviour's been described as idiotic by Oldham boss John Sheridan. So Steve Redgrave won 5 golds, top American sprinter Carl Lewis won 9, but one man's achieved 11 Olympic gold medals. American swimmer Michael Phelps made history this morning by winning the 200-metre butterfly and the 4x200-metre freestyle.
The most decorated Olympian of all time. It just sounds weird saying, I just kept thinking, wow, greatest Olympian of all time. It's a pretty cool saying. It's a pretty cool title, I guess you could say. I'm definitely honored. It's amazing.
Now the 23-year-old's hoping to beat Mark Spitz's record of 7 golds at 1 Games. And later the Murrays are in action in the tennis. Andy and Jamie are playing in the second round of the doubles.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxbury.
Eamon and Diane.
We're obliged to mention on the Hour Every Hour that it's Diane's birthday today. She's 41.
I've got cake and chocolate. There's nothing more that I could want. Oh, there's a nice pair of shoes, and this is a birthday just complete for me.
Eamon and Diane and you.
Peter says, happy birthday, Diane. Do you now qualify for the winter fuel allowance? No, because I'm coming round to burn your house down. I shall be very warm and toasty.
The station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
Yes.
Let's move on. Back tomorrow morning from 6 at BBC Radio Manchester.
I do hope his house doesn't burn down. The cops would be straight round to Diane's. That would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Well, you said you would, and it's gone. Yeah, but I was only joking. Well, they smell your hands. Do they smell of petrol? That would be fine. No, they smell of all smoke. It'd be brilliant, wouldn't it, that? Except for him, like. But anyway, Reg Jim Berry. Hiya, Reg.
Hi, Alan. It was just listening to you today and people coming on and saying about they moved down to the south of England.
Oh, yes.
I was born and bred in Margate. Moved up here about 40-odd years ago. Looked upon as a total foreigner.
Yeah.
In fact, when my wife introduced me to our mother-in-law, she said under her breath, "Who's the bloody foreigner you just brought in?"
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it isn't just people from here moving down south and being ignored, or it gives the impression of that. My mother, believe it or not, lived next to a neighbour for 50 years before this lady died, and all they knew each other as is Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Cleaver. They'd never been in each other's houses. And it was just a nodding acquaintance. Hello, Mrs. Cleaver, how are you? Fine, and that was it, So they used to keep themselves to themselves anyhow.
But that's all right, isn't it? At least you're acknowledging them. The tales we've had, I mean, it happened to me, as I said earlier, in Winchester.
Yeah.
And you say hello, because you do. You say hello to the people you live by. You say hello.
And you get ignored.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, maybe it was their particular shyness. Maybe it was me they didn't like, rather than just anybody. Because I don't think they had any way of knowing that I was from the north. I don't think they were having to go, ignoring me because I was a northerner. Either it was me, and they had no reason to like or dislike me because they didn't know me till then, but they ignored me. And then we had somebody else say much the same thing when they moved down.
Well, when I came up here, I was working for a company, and I was over in Yorkshire for quite some time, and on one of the big transmitters over there, it was TV, and one of their engineers there was saying to me, where do you come from? How many kids you got? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you nosy bugger. And that was my attitude as a southerner. And I spoke to him, you see, and I said, why are you asking all these questions? And he said, well, I just want to be friendly.
Yeah.
And that was it. And to me, that was completely alien.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
So it's just the different way we live, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. I went to, I was working with the RAF doing a project, and I was in Bahrain. And I was in Bahrain Airport, and somebody came across to me and he said, I recognise that accent. I said, why? He said, you're from Margate? I said, yes. So he said, whereabouts? And I told him. He said, that's only 10 doors down from where I live. And seriously, honestly, Alan, I'd never seen him in my life. And he was about the same age as me, and I'd never seen him in my life.
And 10 doors down?
And he'd gone to a totally different school to me, yeah? And like in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to believe, but I had never, ever met him in my life.
Good
Lord.
Lord.
And I've been there for, 20 years before I joined the army.
Well, I must have known... I didn't know everybody in our street, or our avenue, as my mum would insist, but I think I went a lot way further than 10 doors down.
Yeah.
Good heavens.
But that's the way it used to be. And I say, everybody... up here, I know everybody used to... we still do. I'm not going to tell everyone where I live, but we frequently leave our back door open and our front door open, unlocked.
Yeah.
And they've been perfectly okay. I've been doing this for years. People in the street, they know us, and they just come and knock on the door and walk straight in.
Fabulous.
No, you'd never, ever do that in the south of England.
You just wouldn't do it.
You might knock on the door, but you would not step over their threshold until you were invited.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
But even if you'd lived next door for 20 years.
Good heavens.
I know, but that's just the way it is, I suppose.
Well, there you are then.
Like they say, viva la difference, Alan.
Cultural difference. Well, yeah, vive la difference. Yeah, absolutely. Good on you. Cheers, Reg.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Bye.
See, it's not snobby. It's just the different way. Oh, dear. Tim says... The International Olympic Committee have declared ballroom dancing a sport. They can't have done. And will be moving to integrate it into the Olympic Games in the next few years. Well, that's nice, isn't it? London will have to build a dance hall, do they know? It's here. Competitive ballroom dancing is considerably different to its social counterpart. Not the preserve of the middle-aged lecherous men or elderly couples that social dancing is reputed for, but more often populated by very attractive young people made to look ugly by the layers of fake tan and makeup in order to impress the judges. Oh, dear. Come on, dancing as a sport, surprising as that may be to some, the International Olympic Committee have declared ballroom dancing a sport and will be moving to integrate it into the Olympic Games in the next few years. More surprising, perhaps, is how good Britain is at it. Well, we won't be when the others start doing it, but when Queen Elizabeth too, I suppose, but when Queen Elizabeth II invited all the former world champions from the UK from the past 40 years to a party at Buckingham Palace, no less than 55 were former ballroom dancing world champions. Well, there you are. So ballroom dancing could make the Olympic Games, which I think probably goes some way to telling us much of what we need to know about the Olympic Games. Barry in Middleton, are you?
Hi, Alan. All right?
Not bad.
That's good. Listening with interest earlier about you talking about freedom, working class and slaves.
Yeah.
The most famous and my favourite quote of all time about freedom is from a French philosopher of the 19th century called Denis O'Donnell Diderot.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'm going to upset a lot of monarchists and religious people, his famous quote was, "Man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest."
I'm not going to argue with him. He knew a thing or two, didn't he? Mind you, they were chopping the heads off French people at the time. That is good. Yeah, we like that.
I thought it was a brilliant one. I thought I'd share it with you.
Yeah, well, it's my kind of thing. So man will never be free until the death of the last...
The last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest.
Fantastic. And such a lovely picture.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it's got everything you want. We like that. We're very grateful to you for that, Barry. Thank you very much indeed.
See you, Alan.
I like it. Kevin says, a lady last week questioned, are the Olympics worth the money and who pays? She makes a good point, he says. Last week, the BBC interviewed a student who was a yachtsman. He said he had 2 years to finish uni, then he hoped to spend 2 years practising full-time so he could compete in the Olympics in 2012. Who'll keep him and his contemporaries whilst they practice their hobbies? And whilst we're on the subject, just how much will Lord Coe be paid by the time he's finished his stint as mouthpiece for Britain? At a reported £250,000 a year plus expenses. That's more than a local MP claims for property and decorating expenses. Well, he'll pay the yachtsman. If he's any good, if he's a good prospect, then he'll be paid effectively by the lottery, by the people who buy the lottery, because the Olympics and sport and all that. One of the reasons they're claiming, at least, one of the reasons that I hate the term Team GB. I'm not really keen on that, but the British team are doing so well by comparison to earlier times. The British team are doing so well at the Olympic Games is because they've now got proper funding and they are, well, they're paid quite well. I don't know what the discipline was, but I heard one of the athletes being described the other day as receiving £75,000 a year. Now, that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but that's not all wages. £75,000 a year. She doesn't get to spend that on whatever she likes. I mean, she's got to pay for training, she's got to pay for accommodation when she's away at events and all the rest of it, and presumably got to go to competitions around the world and may have to pay to attend those. So it's not all buns. It's not £75,000 a year. That's a great lot of money for doing your hobby. But that's the kind of money we're talking about. But what are the benefits of the Olympic Games? I don't know. They give great entertainment to those that like that kind of thing, and there are many. That's for sure. Whether it's worth it for a nation, I only remember the figure that was quoted from day one. We hadn't had a daily report of this, so maybe nothing was spent the next day, I don't know. But it was said that on day one of the current Olympic Games, which was last Friday, when they had the opening ceremony and all of that, day one of the current Olympic Games, Visa Card had £10 million worth of sales in Beijing on that day. Now, I don't know how many Chinese people have a Visa card. I don't know. I would suspect that the overwhelming majority of that, maybe in excess of 9 million, every penny of that, almost, will have been foreign currency as far as the Chinese are concerned. And that's on day one. Now, it's going to get more, isn't it? Because they're going to get their hotel bill at the end of the fortnight, at the end of the week or whatever. But that was just Visa. You've also got MasterCard, all the others, American Express and all the rest of it. So that was how much money was spent in one day. A phenomenal amount of money, surely. And that's just on the cards. There are other processes, other ways of spending money as well. So, is it worth it? I suppose for the city it is, and the prestige, yeah, it's got to be worth it, hasn't it, for the prestige? It's got to be. So, in the end, you have to say, well, yes, it's worth it. But isn't it also worth it if it provides ambition for young people? Something to strive for, something to aim at, something to attempt for? Because we do say, don't we, the reason thousands upon thousands upon thousands of kids, lads mainly, but the reason they kick a ball about in the street, the reason they play Wally like we used to do, which I was no good at either, but the reason they do that is because they like football. The reason they like football is as much to do with emulating their heroes, whether they play for Bury or Manchester United, it doesn't matter, emulating their heroes. So is it worth it? Yes, because it gives them something to take them outside of their own lives. So from that point of view, as something to strive for, something to aim at, something to encourage you to develop beyond where you would be on the settee, it's worth it from that. Whether it's fiscally worth it, well, that in the end is a mathematical equation, isn't it? But it's certainly worth it from that perspective. But you tell me. But tell me tomorrow. You know the number, 0161 228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. That's 24 hours. As I suppose the text is 07786 206 951. Becky Want is next. I'm not going down the mines this afternoon. It's done and dusted. I've done it once. It seemed like a good idea. I suspect I shall never do it again. Ta-da!
Bolton Market and Middlebrook Centre in Horwich.